going. All right, it's game week. Canes Gators in Gainesville in the swamp this coming Saturday. I am Manny Navarro from The Athletic, joined by Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day podcast. This is the Wide Right podcast. It is Monday night, right around 7:20 p.m. Carlos, Coach Cristobal, his offensive and defensive coordinators, the school's athletic director, all spoke today. We're going to talk a little bit about what they had to say from the press conferences. We're going to break down the Gators and the Canes, and we're going to answer mailbag questions. But I want to start with this, Carlos. Everybody's worried about me because the Seminoles lost last week. And were you worried about me, Carlos, because the
I
Seminoles?
wasn't worried because you took it in stride. You said it was just game one. You really believe in Mike Norvell. You thought maybe it was a good learning experience for your Seminoles. So you were disappointed, but you thought they'd bounce back.
This whole comedic act, I'm not gonna kill it because I know it's important to the fans, but everybody on social media is messaging me saying, "Man, sorry about your team. They lost this weekend." It's become a
It's
phenomenon, really.
at the very least they're being nice about it and they're trying to be concerned. They're being empathetic with you. So I
Right.
mean, hey, take it for what it's worth.
We will talk about what Florida State's loss means in the big picture of the ACC. We'll talk about SMU's comeback win over Nevada a little bit. I don't know if you got a chance to watch either game, Carlos, but let's dive right into what happened today, which is Mario Cristobal, Lance Guidry, his defensive coordinator, his offensive coordinator, who you love. He spoke as well. Uh, uh, First of all, Carlos, this might be the headline. Cristobal said he has a time management coach now.
Yeah.
He was asked about what happened last year, obviously against Georgia Tech. He says that he has a new time management coach and that they are more conscious of time management. But if I'm being honest, Carlos, I don't think there's a new time management coach. I think he's just trying to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. You would hope that he was self-conscious enough to make that sort of a move. Or have somebody on his staff dedicated with a chart. Actually, this weekend, somebody put up a chart. One of the coaches that I follow put up a chart of what to do in what situation, with how much time left, where on the field, 2-point conversions, timeouts, when to take a knee, all those things on the chart. What you can easily have an assistant coach with that in their hand and just be nudging Mario, saying, "Hey, listen, this is the situation. This is what we got to do." The funny thing is that by saying that, by even alluding to it, he's admitting there was a problem, which is, I guess, a step forward for him.
Right. You got to admit it before you can quit it. Uh,
Correct.
Listen, Mario Cristobal, I don't know if you knew this about Mario, but he's an alpha male himself. He's never going to have anybody tell him what to do. He is the head coach of this program. He is the mindset ultimately that there will be advisors, but I think he makes all the decisions. So you guys can all freak out about the whole time management coach. I know you guys are already doing that on social media. Oh my God, he's got somebody to help him now. We're not going to lose games late. Let me be a realist here and just be honest with you. Mark Cristobal is never going to listen to anybody else. He's going to make his own decisions. And the reality here is he has to have learned something from what happened in Miami last year. And nobody else is just going to tap him on the shoulder and all of a sudden, voila, there's a magic new Mario Cristobal. No, it's up to him. Okay, he has to be the difference. He has to understand the game better. Whether or not he's got somebody tapping him on the shoulder to remind him, I think is irrelevant. But you guys make a big deal about it if you want. The other big development to me, Carlos, is something I told you guys about in the preseason, right? When we talked about freshmen, we talked about potential new impact guys that arrived in the summer. It seems now, Carlos, that what Lance Guidry told me on Media Day is coming to fruition, and that is OJ Frederic, the talented freshman from St. Thomas Aquinas, will actually have a role, I think, even going into this game on Saturday. He will actually play on defense more than special teams. I said that he was the freshman that I thought would probably have the most actual impact on the field, not just special teams. And it seems that that is the case. I think it tells us a couple things. One, he's good because you don't just come in and, as a true freshman, all of a sudden overtake, fourth, fifth, third year guys. I think it tells a little bit that maybe there's not a lot of confidence in that secondary room that a freshman can come in right away and do that.
Yeah.
What are your takeaways from it?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I think, as well as OJ may have played in camp and as hard as he's worked, to rely on him as a main rotational guy in your secondary right away over other guys that have been recruited that were higher rated and came in with a lot of ballyhoo and a lot of expectations. That means those other guys aren't fulfilling those expectations, that OJ's passed them up on the depth chart, which is concerning. Which means then if you're relying on this freshman to come in and give you snaps on a rotational basis, there's not a whole lot behind him in terms of guys you have confidence in. So it's, we've been talking about it for a while now, since the spring, right? There's not a lot of depth in that secondary. There's not even a lot of frontline guys in that secondary you can trust that you think are, big time players. Eventually, there will be guys that will be big time players in that secondary, but right now, that's the biggest area of concern for the team. We knew that coming into the season. It's not a surprise, and there's hopefully the reason OJ's getting snaps is because of how well he's playing, and he can really make a big impact, as opposed to the fact that those other guys aren't playing as well and aren't living up to expectations. But I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah, Tamari Brown is going to be the nickel back for Miami, and Lance Guidry kind of told us that on media day as well. They like him covering the slot receiver. He's probably got the best natural ability at doing that. Has the biggest frame, can move outside pretty easily. But I think what this tells us is that between Daryl Porter, Deani Hill, and Jadis Richard, there's no clear cut stud on this team that is overwhelmingly better than OJ Frederic. That he was able to come in and right away sort of play at the same level with those guys. We'll ultimately see how many snaps he gets against the Gators, but you know what? The secondary is our number one question going into the season. I think it will continue to be until we see that they can prove to do a good job. I saw on the behind the scenes footage that Miami's been putting up on YouTube, and I encourage you guys to look at it. They did four videos on camp and just sort of what things were going on behind the scenes. A lot of the players on the team mentioned how good OJ Frederic was playing. They also praised Akeem Mesidor, that he looks absolutely fantastic. Those are two of the guys on the defensive side of the ball that were sort of viewed as big time standouts. And I think it's encouraging that Mesidor had a good camp,
Yeah.
because Miami, I think, could really use him to complement Ruben Bain. I like the guys they got in the transfer portal, but you talk about guys that have proven it here in Miami. You got Ruben Bain, you got Mesidor. Everybody else who is not a transfer, Ahmad Moten, Josh Horton, Anthony Campbell, Armando Blunt, the freshman, Marquise Lightfoot, Cole McCon, they just kind of got here and they really haven't done anything yet. So proven guys in Miami's defensive line that were here, Bain and Mesidor are it. And I think it's really
And both have
encouraging.
played at a very high level. Mesidor
Yes.
was, all Big 12. His first year here with the Hurricanes had a really good season. Was probably paced to do it again, if not for the injury last year. So it's encouraging that he's back to that level that he was at before, and some are saying even better than he was.
Dan Radakovich, Miami's athletic director, met with the media as well today. Said that there's a delay in
In the
the uh,
on-campus stadium?
in the on-campus football
Oh,
complex. Yeah,
oh.
listen, the only guy talking about the on-campus stadium is John Ruiz, and we know what he's doing now. So my point here is Radakovich, that space station that they're supposed to build Mario Cristobal, the thing that he talked about, that we're gonna have this space station like they have at Oregon, and it's gonna be unbelievable. Guys, I think it's pretty obvious that NIL is expensive and it costs quite a bit of money to build a roster these days. It'd be nice to have an incredible football facility, but we were 4 or 5 years away from that anyway. There is a delay in building it. I don't think Mario Cristobal cares. He will take the players over the beautiful practice facility. Now, look, they're still going to put money into it. They're going to update the football complex adjacent to Green Tree practice field. There's going to be the upgraded weight room and all that kind of stuff, but it costs money to win in college football. And I think most programs are redirecting the money that they used to put into stadiums and on-campus facilities to players because that's what they have to do now.
Yeah, and I think it's a factor of a couple things. Number one, obviously NIL, an investment being made there, and directing booster funds to those collectives that are able to pay these guys. Number two, I think it's also a factor of, hey, let's wait and see what happens here over the next couple of years before we start putting hundreds of millions of dollars into this football facility. Because if we're investing all this much money in NIL, or the collective is, and Mario's coming in here and flipping the roster and getting his guys, and we're still ending up 9-3, then you know what? Maybe a $200 million facility is not the best investment. We're not going to get the return on investment that we believe we're going to get. And I think finally the other part of it is, just fiscal responsibility. When they initially decided that they were going to go forward with this project, I don't think inflation had hit the level it had hit. It's currently hit in the country. So it's become more expensive to do a project like this, just because the materials, the labor costs, the interest rates, everything have created just a higher cost for the overall project. So maybe they're pumping the brakes, waiting for a change in the economy before they move forward with the project to make it a little less expensive.
Radikovich also mentioned that Miami will have 4,000 tickets for the Swamp, a stadium that
A
holds
sizable amount.
90,000 people. So 86,000 fans will have been sold through Florida. We'll have 4,000 for Miami there. Carlos, you talked about it in our last show, what it was like to go in the Swamp and sit in the Gator section. I imagine there will be more Miami fans there. But as I spin this forward and we talk about, oh, what a tough environment it is to open in the Swamp in the SEC, I'm going to remind Miami fans that this year there's something called helmet communication in college football. It's brand new, even though the NFL's had it for over 30 years. College football finally got out of the Stone Age, Carlos, and decided, you know what? Let's go ahead and put helmet to coach communications in there. It will last up until 15 seconds are left in the play clock. So instead of sitting there holding up a bunch of emojis and signs and having to worry, hey, did the quarterback get the play? They're actually supposed to hear it in the helmet now, like everybody else in the NFL does. So Connor Stallions, the guy from Michigan, all these other
You can
people who
thank
see
Jim
a sign.
Harbaugh for that, right?
Yeah, we can thank him ultimately. We can send our thanks to him. But the point is, it shouldn't be as difficult to go on the road anymore and communicate with your quarterback. But the coaches, Lance Guidry, talked about this. Mario Cristobal talked about this. Ultimately, they can still communicate old school way if
Right.
needed, if the comms don't work. So if you're worried about Miami going to the Swamp and not being able to hear each other, that still might happen. But at least we've modernized technology a little bit. I just want you to know that.
Right. It's still going to be difficult to hear because he's going to have to cup his Cam Ward's going to have to cup his helmet, and he's going to have to hear that play call coming in. I think it makes it a little bit more difficult when you are doing that because you have the coach talking in your ear, and then you're trying to relay it as it comes in, and then you've got to think through the play as the signals are coming in. You're hitting it piece by piece, and it's registering as you're seeing it.
Hmm.
Some guys are, and this is again, I'm getting a little too techie and a little nerdy with you, a little too philosophical, pedagogical, if you will. Some guys are more visual than they are auditory. So it may be easier for them to see things coming in and see it signaled in and then register as opposed to it coming in through your ears. Just like some people are do better when they see videos as opposed to hearing audio lectures, right? Those
Hmm.
things. So hopefully Cam Ward is an auditory guy and he hears the play and actually filters it a lot better than if he did it visually. Either way, they're still going to probably have to use hand signals because if he's going to audible, it's going to be difficult for him to do that on the line of scrimmage with that level of crowd noise, and especially out to the perimeters, he's going to have to use hand signals to get those calls in. Um, so we'll see. The crowd's going to be a factor, man. It's not something to sneeze at. Trust me, having sat in that stadium, 90,000 people in it, it gets loud as shit. And I can't imagine what it feels like on the field because that stadium's kind of like a bowl, like the old Orange Bowl, and you're getting all that noise pumped down into the middle of that stadium. It's difficult to communicate, but it's something they have to overcome and deal with. Everybody does it in the SEC that goes to play there. Everybody on their schedule does it. It's not impossible. It's just going to make things a little bit more difficult. And the best way to deal with it is get up early and silence that crowd.
Yeah, that would be a good way to start it. Florida State, by the way, did that this past weekend. They went right down the field on Georgia Tech, scored a touchdown,
Yeah,
got
because
up.
that raucous crowd in Dublin, Ireland was really difficult to deal with.
Well, but they got up 8-0 really quickly, and then it didn't work out for them. I think in Miami's case, uh, it might be a little bit different in Florida's backyard. It's a little bit. It's got to be tough to go on the road and play in Europe, right? Your first game. I mean, I'm not looking excuses for the Seminoles. You guys know how much I love them, but I'm not trying to form an excuse. But I got to imagine it's a little bit different emotionally to have to go to Europe to play a football game than to, I don't know, drive 5 hours up the road and play in Gainesville against a hated rival.
Well, I hope the Hurricanes aren't driving. I hope they're taking like a chartered flight and getting there within an hour. That would suck if they got to take that drive to Gainesville because there's nothing on the way to on I-75 on the way up there to look at. It's just a boring ass drive. But yeah, man, I think Georgia Tech had to make the flight also. So
Yes, yeah.
yeah,
Well,
so I
I,
think
I'm not trying to make excuses for the Seminoles. I'm
but you
really
kind of
not.
are. But you kind of are. And I know your boys lost, but let's not go that route. Maybe to say that DJ Uyunglele's checked down Charlie. He's brought that back from Clemson. Last year he was a little bit more explosive at Oregon State, but now he's back to the check down Charlie of his Clemson days. It must be the ACC that brings it out of him. But to say that it was difficult to travel, yeah, it was difficult for them too. I guess maybe Florida State had too many potatoes before the game. They indulged in Irish potatoes and butter.
They did do the jig before the game, and then I don't know if you saw the videos, but the of the players dancing pregame, and then Georgia Tech sort of enjoying their postgame celebration dance
Yeah, they got
with the
jiggy with it.
fireworks. They did get jiggy with it. Miami, they're 2-point favorites going into this game. I still think they're going to win this game by more than 2 points. I think in the fourth quarter, they'll make it by two scores. What is your gut feeling right now? We're going to break down the game in a minute, but how has your feeling on this game sort of evolved over time here?
To me, it's a tale of two possibilities, right? I think there's two sides of the coin. Number one, I think if this team comes in with the right game plan and executes and doesn't shoot themselves in the foot, I think they win by two scores. I think you're probably, or maybe more than that, you're probably looking at something like 31-13, 31-17, if they play the way they should play and execute the way they should execute without killing themselves.
Hmm.
The other thing is, the flip side of it is, if they don't come in and do the things they're supposed to do, and we'll talk about specifically what I think later on, but if they make mistakes, if the crowd noise gets to them, if there's issues with, the new players settling in and not knowing assignments, stupid penalties because of misalignments, of offsides, things like that that are attributed not only to crowd noise, but just not being in the right spot, not understanding your assignment, missed blocks, wrong routes, those kinds of things, then you're probably looking at something like 27-23 Hurricanes, I think.
Okay. I could see that. I could see that happening as well. Let's talk about the other games that just happened this weekend, and then we'll get into Florida, Miami. We've mentioned obviously several times now that Florida State lost its opener. Biggest takeaway for me from watching that game, and I covered it and wrote about it for The Athletic. Yes, Georgia Tech had a good day running the football against Florida State's front seven. And their offensive line, I think, gave up 3 tackles for loss and no sacks. So at the line of scrimmage, Florida State was beaten on both sides of the line. Still came down to a last second field goal. So it's not like Florida State got run out of the building. But disappointing overall performance. DJ Uyunglele, as you mentioned, 13 of his 19 completions, 5 yards or less in terms of actual airspace. So he's not gunning it down the field. I expected that. What I didn't expect was for Georgia Tech's run defense that was that horrendous last season, 131st out of 133 FBS teams, to shut down Florida State's running game the way that they did. Especially in light that Florida State has the most experienced offensive line in the ACC in terms of career starts, combined starts. Um, Let's talk about that. What grabbed you most in that defeat for Florida State, and does this change your opinion of the Seminoles on the season?
It does a little bit, and I think one of the things that grabbed me is they don't have a playmaker at wide receiver. They
Hmm.
don't have a guy that you could say, okay, third and long, or we need a big play. Let's get him the football. Let's find a way to get him the football. And there's nobody like that on that roster. I don't think. I didn't see anybody out there on the field that was doing that. Maybe somebody develops into it, but right now they don't have that explosive guy on the outside they can go to. Again, like you were saying, the fact that Georgia Tech was able to stop the run on them, and I think also the fact that Mike Norvell went away from it. He should have tried to play bully ball. He should have tried to find a way to run the football to ease the pressure on Uyunglele and try and take shots off play action down the field. But again, that's not really Uyunglele's makeup for whatever reason. He just likes to check the ball down. Maybe they did call plays and put him in that situation. He just decided not to go
Well,
that way.
he missed guys.
He
They
missed a
showed
couple.
replays. He missed
He
a
missed a
couple guys
couple.
open. Yeah.
Yeah, he's inconsistent when it comes to throwing the football downfield. And but again, if you've got a dude running wide ass open that can make a play, or a guy that you could hit with a slant or a comeback and can shake some dudes and get upfield and make a 10-yard completion into a 40-yard completion, that helps the quarterback and that helps him gain confidence and also creates space for you in terms of the defense, in terms of how they play you. So to me, like you're saying, I think the inability to run the football, the inability to dominate on both sides of the line of scrimmage, and the lack of a playmaker at receiver really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I would say the linebacker play for Florida State. You talk about them losing their top two tacklers from a year ago. Kalen DeLoach entered the transfer portal, was headed to Colorado, turned around, came back. They went out and got Cam Riley from Auburn. Those are their supposedly two best linebackers. Uh, what I saw was Georgia Tech running a lot of counter, running a lot of plays that ultimately kept Florida State's defensive players out of the right gaps, and they were just running free. Now, I'm not saying they necessarily overwhelmed them by just shoving Florida State guys aside, but it looked like they certainly outsmarted them.
Well, they did. They did to a certain extent. I think the reason those linebackers didn't play as well is because the defensive tackles were getting their asses kicked all game long.
Hmm.
I think you look at the tape and their defensive tackles were getting smashed on counters. They were getting doubled into the ground. They were basically standing straight up and just getting plowed on a lot of plays, which was surprising to me for a team who was supposed to have the best defensive line in the country. They
Right.
sure as hell didn't play like it.
Yeah, I listen, I ranked two of their defensive linemen among the five best at the position. Defensive tackle and Patrick Payton I have as, and I still think they're going to be good, Carlos. I just think it was a bad opening performance for them. And Georgia Tech's offensive line deserves credit. They were the best rushing team in the ACC last year. They gave up the fewest sacks. They had four of their five starters back and a transfer. So to me, don't sit there and just say, well, they lost to a bad team, because I think Georgia Tech is better than they
Yeah,
were a year
I
ago
think
for
they'll be a
sure.
7-5 team.
Yeah, they just have a really difficult schedule. They've got some bad head-to-head matchups for them, unfortunately for Georgia Tech. But uh, to me, ultimately, what I take away is I picked Miami to win the league this year. I felt confident they were the best team on paper, and this only sort of cemented it. A lot of people still think Clemson is going to be really, really good. I think after they watch them against Georgia, they're going to have a different opinion. I think this just further sort of cements to me that Miami can be head and shoulders above everybody in this league if they play the right way.
Yeah, I think Louisville's probably ahead of Florida State at this point and maybe Clemson going into the season, in my opinion. And I think that's going to play out. I think because Rom's a hell of a coach, not just because of the talent he has on the roster, but what he does on offense will always keep him in games. But we'll see, man. I think, like you said, it's early, first game of the season. It's a rivalry game. Florida State's not terrible. They're just not as good as they were a year ago. And anything can happen in a rivalry game. You never know.
Right, for sure. All right, let's talk about this Miami Florida game in Gainesville on Saturday, 3:30 kickoff. I will be there in person to watch this and digest this. Carlos, let's start. Instead of going position by position, we're gonna just break it down to the brass knuckles here. All right, let's start with
The brass
Hurricanes.
monkey.
The Hurricanes running the football against Florida's defense. Who do you give the edge to before we start breaking it down? On your thought process, who do you give the edge to when it comes to Miami trying to run a ball on Florida?
Yeah, I think that's probably their biggest advantage is the ability to run the football on a Gators defensive line that's not very good. I don't think they're all that. I think they're pretty average along the defensive line. I think both their lines really need a lot of help, but specifically, I think the defensive line may be worse than the offensive line. I know you may disagree with that, but I think this is where the Hurricanes have the greatest advantage, and to me, is the greatest concern. If they're going to win this game, and they're going to win it handily. I think the Hurricanes need to run the ball 40 times. And that's coming from me, who likes to air it out. But they should run the ball 40 times. They should feed Damian Martinez. They should feed Jordan Lyle. They should feed Mark Fletcher if he's able to play. If not, AJ, Jesus Christ, the other running back. Feed all three guys. Chris Johnson, get him some touches, and use that stable of running backs that they have. AJ Allen, Jesus,
Yes.
and their offensive line to sort of plow it through and let Cam Ward settle into the game and take his shots and be more efficient with less passing attempts. I think if Cam Ward has to throw the ball 30, 35 times, 35 plus, I think the Hurricanes are in trouble. That means they're not moving the football on the ground, and that means the Gators are doing what they want to do to the Hurricanes. I think it makes it a lot easier for Cam Ward to play off play action, to actually have that defense creep up, give him one-on-one matchups with those receivers because they're trying to stop the run and take advantage of that. And I think that's the best way to go for the Hurricanes. Use the run to set up the pass, make the Gators creep up, commit more bodies to the line of scrimmage, and then hit them over the top. And I think that's where you're going to see the explosive plays.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think Miami needs to run the football in this game. I think part of that is to counteract what Florida wants to do, which is to keep Miami's offense off the field. I think Billy Napier looks at this Miami team, and the way he spoke about them today in his press conference is, hey, these guys are picked to win the ACC and by a couple different people, and they're saying they're a playoff contender, and Cam Ward is the ACC. Like he's saying all the right things as far as Miami's talent, right? Even though the fans in both fan bases may look at these teams and say, ah, what is it? Miami was 7-6 last year. The Gators were 5-7, right? I think he sees it for what it is. Billy Napier's smart. He's been around this game a long time. He coached at Alabama with Mario Cristobal. He knows how Cristobal has built this team. So they're not going to be unprepared. And certainly they've got big bodies on both sides of the line. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that the interesting thing for me in this game is, Florida's linebackers.
Yeah.
When I talked to Kevin Brockway last week, he talked about Shamar James and Pup Howard. Pup Howard, the transfer from South Carolina. He said both of those guys are supposedly going to be legit. They're going to be good at their job. They're going to get in the box and tackle. Florida gave up last season 4.84 yards per carry, which was 13th out of 14 SEC teams. They really took a step back there. Now, if Miami can effectively run the football, everything that you mentioned, they can control the line of scrimmage. I think they win this game convincingly. But if Miami, for whatever reason, has a tough game and they can't run the football, then it really is going to come down to Cam Ward being able to protect the football when he throws it and to make the right plays and not fumble it when he decides to take off and run. Because at that point, I think Miami is going to need him to become more of a runner, especially probably inside the 20 when Miami's trying to score touchdowns. So
Yeah, and you know
that
what? But like you're saying, Pup Howard, that dude
mhm,
missed 0 tackles last year at South Carolina, so he could play. He's a hell of a linebacker. The issue with him is his coverage grade at South Carolina was a 47.5. So if they start running the football and they start coming downhill and they're getting success, they play action, they try to get a back or a tight end involved. Please, for God's sakes, use the tight ends in the backs or use Restrepo, trying to match him up with Pup Howard somehow. They're going to dice him up that way, and that'll be the way the Hurricanes are able to sort of dominate it. The other thing is, to me, if I'm Billy Napier and if I'm the defense for the Florida Gators, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to confuse Cam Ward. So he's settling into a new offense, settling in with new personnel, trying to figure out his reads. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to move the front right before the snap. I'm bringing pressure. I'm showing from different angles, maybe dropping out of it, dropping defensive linemen, playing a little zone fire, and trying to do things that aren't too complex in terms of our scheme, but look complex to make him think things out a little bit more. Because as you know, Cam Ward is at his best when he gets rid of the football quickly. When he holds on to it, that's
mhm.
when the negative plays start to happen and the ability for a turnover to occur happens.
All right, let's talk about Miami's passing game against Florida's pass defense. The Gators actually feel pretty confident in what they've got in their secondary. We talked about this with Kevin Brockway last week. If you listened to last week's show with Kevin, they've got some DBs with experience. Jason Marshall, the cornerback from Miami, Palmetto, 32 career starts, veteran guy there. They added Asa Turner at safety, who was at Washington, obviously played with Misha Powell over there. 26 career starts. They got Jordan Castell, who's one of their star young players. He's a sophomore this year, led the team in tackles last year. And they've got other guys that in their secondary that they like. But ultimately, this Florida pass defense, you look at pass efficiency defense rating. Last year, they ranked 13th out of 14 SEC schools. So they were susceptible to the big play, gave up 27.6 points a game, which was also 11th in the SEC among 14 schools. I think Miami has the receivers that are more than capable between Xavier Restrepo and Jacoby George, Sam Brown. I think Elijah Arroyo, he's finally healthy. This feels like a moment where we might see a lot of Elijah Arroyo in this game. I would give Miami the edge here as well. I think Miami's offense should have a good day against Florida. What do you feel about Miami's passing game versus Florida's pass
Yeah,
defense?
like you're talking about, they ranked Florida last year, ranked 111th in pass defensive grade according to PFF,
Yeah.
and they were 97th in the country in explosive plays allowed as a defense. So that's not good. And I think the reason that happened was not because they were so bad on the back end, but because their front seven was so
Yeah,
bad.
lack of pass rush.
Exactly.
1.83 sacks per game, which was
Right.
12th in the SEC. Yeah.
And what does it tell you that Jordan Castell was a leading tackler as a safety, right?
Hmm.
That means he's coming up and run support and having to come up and make plays. So if the Gator front seven is able to handle their business and not cause the secondary to have to come up and run support, then I think it's going to be a tough day for Miami because that, to me, the wide receiver group and the secondary are Florida's strengths. Those are the two best units that they have. So if you're going in there and just playing against that secondary without the threat of a run, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult because those guys aren't committing to the box. Now, if you're running the football well and you're able to get up to that 150, 175, 200-yard mark, those safeties, it's because those safeties are coming up and trying to run support, then you're probably going to have a 300-yard passing day as well because you're going to hit them over the top.
Right. I will say this. Let's not forget here that Miami is going to have a redshirt sophomore starting at left guard for the first time in his career. 162 career snaps. Matthew McCoy, there is one baby that's being sort of put out there in this game for the first time in his career. They've got Zach Carpenter at center, Jalen Rivers at left tackle, Nez Cooper at right guard, and Francis Mauigoa at right tackle. I'm not worried about Miami's offensive line doing a good job against this Florida defense, but I would say, Carlos, anything happened to one of those five guys, that can change the entire complexion of this game quite a bit because I just I don't like the backups that Miami has going into the season. I expressed that to you a couple weeks ago on the show. It's not that I don't think those guys are capable. I just think it would have been nice to have a couple more experienced guys available in the event that something bad were to happen because you need depth. And we talk about the college football playoff, 12 teams getting in, like you're gonna have bumps and bruises along the way. And I think that's the one thing that can short circuit this Miami offense. I love their playmakers. I like what they've got in the backfield. I like Cam Ward. Hell, I've even got faith that if Emory Williams had to come in and play, like I think Miami's offense would still be functional. Wouldn't be elite, but it would be functional. Like they wouldn't necessarily lose because they can't score. To me, where I'm most worried is the offensive line, and I'm gonna go to my grave saying that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, Matthew McCoy played, I think, about 178 snaps last year, somewhere in that range, mostly as a tight end. They bring him in
Right, like a second
like
tight end, a sixth lineman, essentially.
right. So it's different than playing and starting at guard. And doing that in your first game as a starter against an NCC opponent on the road like Florida is tough. And I think the other thing that's going to be interesting to see is, yeah, Zach Carpenter is an experienced guy, but he's coming from the Big Ten. It's a different environment here, right? I mean, he's played against some great teams over there, but I think playing in the swamp, playing in that heat, also, sorry to mention the weather. Some people hate that. Um, but I think his ability to get the line set, get the
Hmm.
right line calls in that environment with that noise, and him picking up the offense for the first time is going to be interesting. That's a key matchup for the Hurricanes as well, because as you know, the center is the quarterback of that offensive line, and if he doesn't make those right calls, if he doesn't get him in the right position, then it's trouble.
And I wouldn't poop on Florida's defensive line completely. They did have one of their best players hurt last year, Justice Boone. He is back. He's healthy. Missed 2023 with an ACL injury. He's a guy that they think will be effective as an edge rusher. Cam Jackson's a big body dude. Tyreek Sapp, Caleb Banks, Desmond Watson's the 400 pound nose tackle, 400 plus pound nose tackle. They've got guys that are SEC caliber players. They just haven't been super productive, like in
They're also
terms.
counting on George Gums Jr. because he's coming from Northern Illinois. All right, he came from Northern Illinois.
Well,
They're counting on that guy.
I understand, but my point is, don't just snub your nose and be like, "Oh, the Gators
They're
sucked
also
last year."
counting on Joey Slackman, who's from the Ivy League. He's the Ivy League Defensive Player of the Year at Penn, but he's coming from
Yes,
Penn.
yes, yes. I get it. I understand. For the Miami fans that think they're gonna go in there and we're gonna just run all over these guys, like they've got players too. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm trying to say.
They've filled out a roster. There are players on the team.
Florida's rushing attack versus the Miami run defense. All right, this is where I think the Hurricanes could really take control of this game, because first of all, Florida's running back, Montrell Johnson, your favorite. I know you
This is how we do
I,
it.
I was queuing you up. Uh, Look, he's probably going to play. It's my guess, my estimation from what I've heard.
If
But
he
I
goes in and he plays coming off this injury, he's going to turn to the crowd and just say, "This is for the honeys."
listen, he's gonna play, but I don't think he's gonna get a full workload. He will be on a pitch count. And Kevin Brockway basically said the same thing to us last week. Brockway, of course, from the Gainesville Sun, covers the Gators. Now Florida has other guys that they have confidence in. Cam Carroll's a transfer from Tulane, missed last season. He's on the roster. Trayon Webb, Jacoby Jackson, and they really like these freshmen that just came in the door. Jaden Baugh, Kanan Daniels, all of those guys, but they just don't have a ton of experience and a ton of production. So that sometimes can be a little bit of an issue, right, Carlos? Because you don't have film on some of these running backs. You have to go back to high school to see what the hell these guys look like. So that'll be interesting. Florida's left side and center on their offensive line, I think, will be solid. I think it's the right side that Miami has to take advantage of in this game, which means Akeem Mesidor could be huge for Miami in this game.
hmm I think both Mesidor and Bain could be huge in this game. To me, those running backs without the experience, without a lot of carries and stuff like that, going up against the Hurricane front seven, game one is going to be a little bit difficult for them. That's a tall task, and I don't think the Gators expect to be able to run the football well against the Hurricanes. They're going to have to do it on occasion to keep them honest, to try and stop and slow that pass rush down. But I think, the other thing that's going to be a problem for them is those backs in pass protection because it's not a whole lot of experience. Those guys are jumping in
Hmm.
there. If you're counting on a freshman
Correct.
also to try and pass protect and chip an end or come in there and protect against a blitz, you're going to be in trouble, especially against this defense. And I think Miami's front seven is good enough to do that without the blitz. They could probably handle this offensive line just straight up without bringing too much pressure. And I think that plays to their advantage. The other thing is, when you're talking about how the Hurricanes line up and what their Gators are going to try and do to them, I think if I'm the Gators, if I'm Billy Napier, what I'm trying to do is I use the passing game as part of the run game. I'm throwing quick screens, I'm throwing bubbles, I'm throwing, shovel passes, running draw plays with the run game. I'm trying to use the backs and pass in the passing game to try and get the ball out of Graham Mertz's hands where he's efficient and quick to slow that pass rush down so the Hurricanes aren't pinning their ears back and coming right after me and trying to slow things down to try and then maybe make some plays down the field later on and take advantage of the size that they have a receiver and speed they have a receiver against those Hurricane DBs. The other thing I try to do if I'm Florida is wherever Ruben Bain is lined up, I'm putting a tight end and an H-back or a tight end and motioning in a receiver so I can widen his split a little bit and make his path to the quarterback a little bit longer. Right. And I'm chipping if I can. If I can put two tight ends on a tackle on Ruben Bain or two tight ends on Ruben Bain, I'm doing that to try and slow him down. I'm trying to take my chances with everybody else on that defensive line because I know that guy's proven. I know he's all ACC. I know that guy can come after me and disrupt the game. Now, they're not counting on Hakeem Mesidor coming in and doing the same thing. Maybe they aren't. But they probably aren't because they didn't see him last season. They're not expecting him to maybe be 100% and coming back the way he's supposed to come back. But to me, that's what I try to do if I'm the Gators. I try and slow the Hurricanes down by using quick game,
Yeah.
by getting the ball out of Kramer's hands quickly and slowing that rush down and making the Hurricanes think before they react, and also doing what Georgia Tech did, right? Run counters, run misdirection, use unbalanced formations to try and, again, slow that run game down. You take an advantage against that front and do what you can to slow them down. Conversely, if I'm the Hurricanes, I'm feeling confident up front. I think I've got a front seven that can really dominate against this offensive line. They're counting on a guy from San Diego State to come in and start at right tackle, who's okay. Their former right tackle got bumped down to right guard. They say he's better suited to play guard, but he was atrocious at tackle last year. So we'll see how he plays at guard. Um, and I think if the Hurricanes stay in a too high shell, they can pretty much protect themselves on the back end and eliminate the big play in the passing game. If they just rely on that front seven, if they're going to bring pressure, maybe bring one more. So bring one additional guy as opposed to two or three, or two guys. So that way they're still protected over the top with a too high shell.
All right. You say so. Look, I think what we're going to see from Florida ultimately is a short passing game, which is what Graham Mertz is really good at. The one area that I think Florida can give Miami problems, right? Because we've seen it before. Linebackers in coverage, not always great. And I know Francisco Maui Noah, Kiko Maui Noah, had a great year last year, led the ACC in tackles for loss, had stacks. But in pass coverage, not necessarily the greatest. And I think Wesley Basant is another guy that to me has to sort of prove it. I think where Florida tries to win this game, as you said, is in those short passes, getting the ball out to Trey Wilson, their sensational sophomore who had 61 catches last season for 538 yards and six scores. They picked up Chimere DK, the transfer from Wisconsin. They got Elijah Badger from Arizona State who had 65 catches last year. That is their strength. They're going to
They got a
try.
big dude in Khalil Jackson, 6'3", 215, which is a matchup nightmare on the outside for the jump
Yeah,
ball.
yeah, and their tight ends are not bad. They're productive guys in terms of being able to at least catch the ball and do something with it. Arliss Boardingham, redshirt sophomore, 26 catches, 269 yards, four scores. They've got other guys there that are big
Yeah,
body. So it in the end, this game I think comes down to how well does Miami wrap up? Do they
yeah,
tackle? Right? Do
exactly.
they tackle well? And I think that's where again, this is where what's going to be interesting here is Mish Powell and where he lines up, right? Is Miami going to put him on the tight end or are they going to put him on Trey Wilson, right? To try to shut down Florida's best weapon. Florida does not attack the ball deep down the field. Yes, Mertz completed close to 73% of his attempts last year, had 20 touchdowns and only three picks. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes, but he gets sacked a lot and his shots down the field are not usually complete.
He was 56% on 108 attempts on passes 10 yards or more. That tells you that he's not very effective when he had a 73% completion percentage a year ago. 68% of his attempts total of all
Hmm.
attempts came
Yeah,
under 9 yards. He
yeah.
completed
It's
87% of those, but
it's
it's
gonna
just
it's gonna look like DJ Uyunglele did.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another thing. He's of all his attempts, 62% of his attempts were in the middle of the field.
Hmm.
And another 24% were on the right side. So, I mean, he's definitely middle, right side heavy. If the Hurricanes bring pressure from that side and flush him to the left and force him to throw to the left side, to his left, he's going to be in trouble.
Yeah, again, Miami's tackling is going to be paramount in this game because Florida is going to try to create lanes for their ball carriers to get through in the open field. And this is a game where you talk about Miami's biggest deficiency, right? It's the secondary. Those guys have to wrap up. And if OJ Frederic is a guy as a freshman can come in right away and do a good job wrapping up, not letting plays get behind him, I think Miami wins this game comfortably. But if Florida is effective in its short passing game and its short
Yep.
passing game turns from a 7 yard hitch or a quick little curl where somebody catches the ball and all of a sudden they're making guys miss, that can make this a ball game. And I think ultimately that's where Miami could lose this game on the road in the swamp with
Yeah,
missed
or if they're
tackles.
effective with it and they're moving the chains with that quick passing game, and now the secondary has to roll up and
Hmm.
support to try and make those tackles, and
Right.
then you're getting more one-on-ones on the outside, that becomes a problem.
Right. And so Damari Brown in the slot, I think is going to be big as well. I would assume that he will be lined up with Trey Wilson most of the game. There will be times when Florida tries to obviously move Wilson around in motion, and that's when, maybe you see Amish Powell pick him up on the other side of the field, depending if Miami's going zone or man the whole game. So they will mix it up. It will be an interesting chess battle, but I still expect Miami to win this game. I told you, I think they'll win by double digits, 2 scores. Will it be a blowout? I don't necessarily think so, but I think it'll be a game where you feel like Miami convincingly went on the road and had an impressive win,
Yeah.
and
If they
feels
get
good
him
about
in,
itself.
defensively, if they get him in third and long a lot in obvious
Hmm.
passing situations, the
Yeah.
Gators are. And I think when they do get him in third and long and it's an obvious passing situation, you'll probably see Mesidor and Bain rushing from the inside,
Hmm.
and then bring Barron and Austin on the outside. And then at that point, Graham Mertz better put his head between his legs and kiss his ass goodbye.
All right, let's get to our mailbag, Carlos. We have a few questions here that I want to make sure we get to. This is from Randall Carlson on Twitter. Who is the new time management coach? Carlos, if you had to guess which coach on staff would be put in
The Mad
charge,
Hatter.
the Mad Hatter. I don't think anybody's in charge but Mario Cristobal. That's just my opinion.
Doc Brown needs to be the time management coach. That way we could rewind time, jump in the DeLorean, go 88 miles an hour, and take it back a place so we don't fuck up again.
All right, this is from Samuel Dumarquet. He says, "Hot take: double-digit Cane win. Seminoles and Gators hold joint space, trembling in fear about the storm brewing down south." What do you think?
Hey, like you said, man, if they tackle on defense, if they don't miss a whole bunch of tackles and let guys make, explosive plays after they miss tackles, if they do what they're supposed to do on offense and just run it down their throats and then make plays over the top after, I think they do win by double digits. I don't think that's a concern. But if they turn the ball over, if they stall, if they're not able to run the ball effectively, if Cam Ward has to throw the ball 36, 37 times, I think it'll be a close game.
Sam's got a bonus question. No question, but can you talk about how bad FSU looked in the trenches and as a team? I listened to every podcast that would speak about it, and I still can't get enough. Go Canes. Um, Look, man, they did look bad, but I will say this: they have talent at that position, and I would assume coaches will make some adjustments. So don't start like just thinking, oh, FSU is going to be terrible this year because I don't believe that.
Yeah, of course you wouldn't.
Scary Rhombus. The only thing that has me concerned is that we can't get 10 wins this regular season. It is coaching. On a scale from 1 to 10, how worried are you about coaching? What is your biggest concern? Scary Rhombus. My concern about the coaching, I from a scale from 1 to 10, I would say a 3. I think look, talent always overcomes coaching in my mind. Like unless you're being really, really stupid and have a terrible game plan, um, it's ultimately up to the quarterback to decide where he's going with the ball and what he's going to do. I don't know, man. Like I'm not that concerned. I think they've got the Jerrys and the Joes now. Where are you at in your fear factor here, Carlos?
I agree. I'd bump it up to like a four, but I would say, I would say that I think there's enough talent on this team that if there's no major injuries, that they should be able to overcome coaching. I
Hmm.
think it's just one of those things where you are overwhelming teams for the most part on the schedule. If there is a game where you've got to make some coaching decisions to out chess match somebody, then I'm not feeling so confident. Like if
Hmm.
you're in a game with Louisville where it's your mind against Jeff Brahms,
Yeah.
not feeling so good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Cali Kane 818 says keys to the game for Miami to come out with a W. We kind of just went over it, but I would say the main thing is don't turn the ball over and run the football. If they do
Yep.
that, they should win this game.
Tackle, block, don't turn it over.
They're better than Florida. They just have to go out there and do it and not
Exactly.
screw it up. All right, Armando Izagirre. The first game I remember as a fan was a loss to Ohio State in the national title game. Over the years, the Canes have drained the optimism out of me. I'm a pessimistic fan every year. Please convince me why we should be optimistic going into this year. I'll
Well,
let you
first of
go.
all, first of all, listen, this poor guy, what sort of a life has he lived? If his first hurricane memory is a loss to Ohio State, my God. And then that run after that, this guy has not had a chance to enjoy not even the '01 Hurricanes.
Right.
My dude, I feel for you. I would say some whiskey, maybe some bourbon will help your life. Why should you be more optimistic? Number one, Cam Ward. I think he's much better than what we've had a quarterback over here in a long time. I think the offensive and defensive lines, like we've talked about, I think a guy like Damian Martinez, a running back, is a game changer. Um, Feel good. It's not going to be. Don't expect 12-0. Although as I get closer to the game and I get closer to the season starting, my irrational side starts coming out and become more like
Uh-oh.
Calvin Harris. I start turning into Kelvin, but don't expect 12-0. Go in there expecting 10, 11 wins. 11 wins. I don't know. Now I'm getting nuts. But it's going to be a lot better than it's been in the past. It's not going to be 7-5. It's not supposed to be 7-5. So go in there optimistic.
I was the guy who was out of control a couple of shows ago. And now all of a sudden you're getting to be the same way.
The
What is
season's
it?
getting close, Manny. What do you want me to do, bro? All right. I'm hyped up on Diet Coke. I'm going crazy here. The Hurricanes are 4 days away from playing. I need this in my life right now. Okay.
All
The
right,
other
I'll
thing is,
get.
I have a similar experience. My first memory for the Dolphins was losing the Super Bowl to the 49ers. And, it's been a great run ever since.
See, you and this guy can relate.
Yeah.
Daniel Fields, Danny 2430 on Twitter says, "Do you think the lack of tight end running back involvement in the passing game was more on Dawson or TVD last year? From practice reports, are you seeing more utilization?" Well, first of all, Daniel Fields, nobody gets to really watch what they're doing. I mean, and live to tell about it. Mario Cristobal will have you killed if you report on anything you see in practice. Um, I think part of it is just what Miami had personnel wise last year. They liked AJ Allen out of the backfield. They liked Mark Fletcher catching passes. But Elijah Arroyo at tight end was not 100%. Cam McCormick, uh,
He's
you
not a
know,
pass catcher.
is not a pass catcher. You had a freshman, Riley Williams, just get in there. You're not going to throw him 40 balls. I think part of it was just what you had going for you. Sometimes you just go with what works. And they were a 7-6 team, so not a lot necessarily worked. Now there's more diversity. I think Mark Fletcher's healthy. Damian Martinez wants to prove he can catch balls out of the backfield and be effective. AJ Allen, I think, is completely over whatever was hampering him early in the year last year. Um, so maybe the ball gets spread around a little bit more. And I think part of it too is you take what the defense gives you. And with three legitimate receivers now between Restrepo, Sam Brown, and Jacoby George, I think teams are going to give you the underneath stuff. I think it's going to be up to Cam Ward to make those decisions and check the ball down to Elijah Arroyo in the middle of the field or check the ball down to one of his receivers and let them go out and make a play. So I wouldn't necessarily put it all on TVD. I think it was just a matter of this is what they had last year, and they rolled with what they thought was best.
Yeah, but based on the alignment and the things they ran, it didn't look like the tight end was really a focal point of the offense, or they didn't really try to get the ball to anybody.
Yeah, McCormick was the tight
Riley
end.
Williams was there and he made a couple plays when they threw him the ball. Yes, I know. Cam
Yes.
McCormick, when he was in the game, forget about it. It was just a battering ram. And just like, how do they feel? I'll tell you how they felt about the tight end, man. You know how good they felt about the tight end? They brought in Matthew McCoy to play tight
Well, he was a blocking tight end.
end. Exactly. That's my point.
All right, Miami Hurricanes enthusiasts. Position groups where UF has improved year over year. I guess he's making fun of what Billy Napier had to say about their team. I think the job that Billy Napier is in, the position that he is in, is not a good one. Like when you've got to hit the reset button and you're doing it in the SEC against that schedule, it's a harder job than what Mario is dealing with in the ACC. There's just better teams in that league. So I don't want to come on here and just shit on Billy Napier and the Gators and be like, yo, like he stinks at his job and he's not good at it, and some like it takes a whole village now to win in college football. You got to have the NIL. You got to have the support and the system around you to help attract guys. They had such a tough schedule last year, dude. They lost their last 5 games. How are you going to hold on to any? How would anybody hold on to the recruiting class when you lose your last 5 games, right? Like, how is that recruiting class going to stay together? You'd have to pay them probably double or triple what they're asking for.
Well, Mario had a
So,
hell of a recruiting class coming off a 5-7 season.
but that's Mario and that's Miami.
And that's the point, baby. That's
We're
the point.
comparing apples to oranges
No, we're
here.
not. We're comparing to a guy who's coaching a premier program in the SEC to a guy who's coaching a premier program in the ACC, which, by the way, that SEC program has had a lot more success over the last 20 years than the ACC program has had. So he's got a lot more to work with, more resources, better facilities, and still can't get the job done. Your boy Billy Napier is a poor man's Ron Zook.
Oh, Jesus, you're vicious, man. You're
I
just
am. I'm telling you, game day's approaching, and I got no pelo en la lengua this time, baby.
all right. This is Larry Shender, our buddy Larry from Miami Media Associates on Twitter. Who will we be talking about as a breakout star on Saturday night? My take: Martinez with a 150-yard game and 3 touchdowns. Yeah, I think my money is on Damian Martinez to have a huge day. I think it's probably closer to like 120 yards and a touchdown or two. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mark Fletcher gets a touchdown or two as well in this game if he doesn't hit the 100-yard mark. I think ultimately if Miami, I could see Miami running for 200 yards in this game, controlling the
Yeah.
clock and winning by 2 scores. That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, and I think you may see a long touchdown by either Sam Brown or Jacoby George because the Gators try and get up and run support and bring that secondary down and they get hit over the top.
hmm Brett Peterson, B. Pete, 91-21. He wants a final score prediction. Carlos, are you ready to do that?
I'm swinging between the two, dude. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be that 31-13 or if it's going to be more 27-23. I'm going to go conservative and go 27-23.
I'm going to go 34-20, Miami.
Wow. All right.
All right,
I like yours better, I'll tell you that much.
Nick Green, Big Juice 52. Are you guys buying into all the hype around Miami and expecting a 10 plus win season? Me personally, absolutely not. 7-5 at best till proven otherwise on a consistent basis. Nick,
I see what he's doing there. I see what he's doing there. He's reverse psychologying himself.
yeah, I think he is. I think he is. Nick, I've said it. I think Miami wins the ACC this year. I hope I'm right because I want to shut all of my critics up who say that I'm a homer. You don't understand, Carlos. I get the flip side of this too. Oh, you're a homer. You're only picking Miami because you root for Miami. Blah blah blah. And then when I say Miami's going to go 7-6, like I did last year, right? Remember when I said Miami's going to go 7-6? Oh, I'm a hater. I'm a hater because I said Miami's not good enough yet to win, and that I don't necessarily believe in this team yet. So you can never win. But if I
And I said 8 and
correctly
4, and if it wasn't for a stupid knee, I would have been right.
if I correctly predict Miami winning the ACC after hitting on 7-6 last year, I want everybody to just shut up and leave me alone. All right, can we agree
I
on
agree.
that?
I agree 100%.
All right, brother. Listen, thank you for doing this podcast with me again. I hope those of you who tuned in on YouTube will give it a thumbs up and maybe a follow, show us a little bit of love. Make sure you follow Carlos at MIA All Day Pod. And you just came out with a podcast, didn't you?
Yeah, I finally dropped an episode. So you can find that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and it's a detailed breakdown of the game. I go into player grades and all that kind of stuff. A lot of stuff that I said here, but just a little bit more detail.
Yeah, and appreciate you once again helping me out. For those of you who want to follow my written word in the Athletic, I've got several stories up, not necessarily about Miami, but college football in general. We're gonna have my Hope-O-Meter story coming out on Wednesday. Always just kind of a fun read to see what fan bases are really thinking about their programs and the expectations for the coming season. I can tell you I had some pretty good laughs with just how crazy other fan bases are, Carlos. I'm always sort of exposed to the craziness of Miami fans, but now I get a chance to read the actual thoughts of fans from everywhere across the country. And I got to tell you, they're just as crazy as Miami fans.
Yeah, and you know what? I think your new role here with the Athletic reminds me of the old and living color, the skit with the Jamaican family where oh you're the
Yes.
lazy lama beam, you only got 3 jobs, Manny, you've got 19 beats. Where that's you're lazy. What are you doing?
Yeah, I got to tell you, this other job of being a Catholic school soccer
Oh
coach
man,
is
listen,
is is another tough one on me, but I'm gonna do it. It's from short season, month long. I'll be
there's high
done early
expectations,
October.
Manny. I've heard around the Catholic athletic conference that you're supposed to be the primary soccer's version of Ted Lasso.
Yes.
And you got to bring it, bro. You got to bring it. Not only because that you've got this pedigree that you're coming in with from the Miramar Soccer Optimist League, where you've turned programs around, but also because you're now coaching my daughter's school because
Hmm.
your daughter's attending the same school. So we
Yes.
need to have some Barracuda pride, and you gotta man up, bro. Because I'm gonna heckle your ass from the stands if you don't win.
I'm hoping that we can get a few W's. I will tell you this, Carlos. There's more talent on this team than I've ever had on any team that I've coached before. So I feel blessed. I feel like I walked into a good situation. I'm just hoping that those kids who showed up to the first couple of tryouts slash practices actually go to the games because I can't drive them myself. There's no team bus. They've got to have their parents drive them there. So I
Yeah.
really won't know what I have till I show up on game day.
Yep. Absolutely. And they better not ask me for some rides because I ain't doing it.
Well, Carlos, thank you for riding with me today. We will come back at you next week after the Miami, Florida game in the Swamp Saturday. Be sure to follow me at Manny_Navarro. Be sure to follow Carlos on Twitter as well. We will have plenty of commentary from the game and much more. Thanks for tuning in.
Peace.